University professors demand that Biden create a commission to monitor and punish misinformation. How about we start with the professors themselves, who are clearly misinformed in thinking that we actually live in a communist country. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start in Joe Biden's America, as a pair of university professors are now urging the president to create a special commission to stop the spread of right-wing thoughts and ideas. You know, with all due respect, there's no other way to say this. The university professors who want this nonsense, who think that anybody who has a different opinion from theirs should not be able to say it, they have to be decommissioned from their universities. We're watching a situation now where the left is demanding anybody who voted for Donald Trump, anybody whose kids had to watch you vote for Donald Trump, have to be reprogrammed. We want punishment. We want deplatforming. People who supported the Donald Trump administration openly should be not allowed to get jobs. We're already talking about celebrities holding vigils to blacklist companies that hire former Donald Trump administration people. And we, the hoi polloi, right? We, the lower class nobodies who voted for this guy, we have to be re-educated and retrained. It seems to me that if you're a university professor whose job it is to teach children, to teach young people, and that's your attitude to different ideas, you should be the one that should lose your job. If you're using your position as a professor, somebody who is supposed to be all about the transmission of ideas, about engaging in debate and compromise and the understanding of complicated human interactions, and you're using your position to demand that the President of the United States silence literally 50% of an entire country of 320 million people, then you are the ones should lose your jobs. You are the Hollywood actors and actresses should not be allowed to work anymore. You are the ones who should pay a price. But alas, we live in Joe Biden's America.
So the two professors, who are at least openly saying it in an op-ed piece, who are urging for Joe Biden to create this presidential misinformation commission to counter all what they're calling are the right-wing lies, of course.
Right-wing lies, yeah.
Are professors Bill Adair and Philip Napoli, and they're public policy instructors at Duke University. And they argued that basically the storming of the Capitol by a mob of Trump supporters proves the need for a government panel to decide what speech ought to be permitted.
First of all, was it a mob of Trump supporters?
This is the question.
I keep seeing every day new guys being arrested and then given bail who were this left-winger, they were this kind of an anarchist. It clearly was. And here's my thought to you. And I'm jumping all over your lead in here, so I apologize. But I say it again. If the same people are not willing to hold accountable left-wing lies, how many lies did the left tell about Donald Trump? How many lies were there in the Christopher Steele document? How many lies were there in the Russian collusion nonsense? How many lies were there that Trump actually praised racists? When you go back and look at the video, he did no such thing. Yet Kamala Harris campaigned on those lies. We're going to purge right-wing lies by starting from the premise that all of the left-wing lies were true. That's what's so dangerous about this.
Yes. Now, according to their op-ed, they said in his first week in office, President-elect Biden should announce a bipartisan commission to investigate the problem of misinformation and make recommendations about how to address it. The commission should take a broad approach and consider all possible solutions, incentives, voluntary industry reforms, education, regulations, and new laws. Now, I don't know if they've really gotten to this yet, but I already have a name picked out for it.
Go for it.
Ministry of Truth.
Where have we heard that before? Can I ask
I came up with it all by myself.
Before we discuss one more argument in this garbage piece of scholarship, explain to me what they mean by bipartisan. So does that mean what exactly? Bipartisan meaning half the country that voted for Donald Trump. You're going to let one of them on the committee? No. I'm pretty sure that bipartisan, you mean radical progressives and moderate Democrats. You'll let Joe Manchin on the committee, maybe. But the idea that you're going to put a serious intellectual who supports Donald Trump on that committee, nonsense. The fact that you are afraid to have genuine bipartisanship in this shows just how partisan you are.
Well, and Adair, by the by, is the well-known He's the founding editor of the well-known fact-checking website known as PolitiFact.
Oh, yes.
So that says nothing about his political leanings at all.
The one that's giving advice to Twitter to ban people who, support Donald Trump.
Yes.
Oh,
well,
that one. Okay.
Yeah. Here's what he said, and he admitted that the recent attempts to censor speech have failed. And he wrote that for the past 4 years, academics and journalists and philanthropists and foundations and tech leaders have thrown hundreds of millions of dollars at the problem to no avail. Okay, you admit that.
So you're not
however,
you're not apologizing for censoring people.
No, you're saying
you're
okay,
apologizing that it hasn't worked.
Yes, but let's give it the old college try again, is what they're saying. That's where they follow up with, let's try again.
The
That's
college
what they're saying.
try means get the president of the United States to create a federal commission to silence people who disagree with him.
And that's what they're running to do. Exactly. That is precisely what they're running to do. Yeah, so they think, again, that this whole commission is taking a broad approach. I want to reinforce that, a broad approach, and consider all possible solutions. And as we know that we are, now living in a Joe Biden fantasy land? What do we want to call it?
Senior citizen retirement home.
Now that we're doing that and we're senile, all possible solutions and broad approach really means obviously the opposite. Just like the Ministry of Truth.
It's very narrow.
Means propaganda.
Yep.
So they're going to start the Ministry of Truth, which means they're going to do the opposite of what it actually says. That's, again, 1984. Go read it, people. Go read it.
I can't remember a single time in my life when election was won.
That's because you're senile
When
now.
election was won by one party. Well, that's what qualifies me to be president,
exactly.
Then, right? I cannot remember a single time in my lifetime when an election was won by either a Democrat and a Republican, and the first order of business was how to make sure that nobody ever votes for a candidate like that again before. I've never seen this before, right? And Donald Trump's big problem was that he was an outsider. Right? If he were a moderate, typical rhino Republican, they wouldn't be saying this now. They're saying it because they want to make sure the American people never, ever step out of the privileged halls of Congress to elect a nobody.
Well, and what they're saying, and this was sort of in your lifetime, but you were a wee little lad at the time. They're saying in their op-ed, if you read the thing, Biden actually has good precedent to start this because back in the 60s, when President Lyndon Johnson convened the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, the Kerner Commission, as it was commonly known, sought to explain the root causes of civil unrest in American cities and make recommendations about how to diffuse the tensions. The commission paid particular attention to the role of the media. In a statement that resonates with the current moment, the commission concluded that there was a significant imbalance between what actually happened during events and what was reported in newspaper, radio, and television coverage.
Well, fair enough, but none of that had anything to do with whether you were a Republican or a Democrat.
There it is.
It was about collectively looking at how the media, who's always in the last 50 years been a partisan pain in the butt, right? How the media skews things, magnifies things, ignores important things, and finds in trivial things huge things to gripe about. So in other words, this is the precedent here is let's fix the media. Let's hold the media accountable for its distortions. Let's hold the media accountable for its palpable lies and the huge thumb they put on the anti-Trump campaign message this time. If you did that, you would be doing a service because of the protections given to the speech, to journalism, to reporting in the First Amendment. There is a huge justification for making sure that power, that tremendous power we have given to journalists is used fairly, is used correctly, is not abused in the name of certain politics at the expense of others. That would be a legitimate thing to look at. But this idea that you're going to basically decide that anybody who had the temerity to vote for Donald Trump because they couldn't stand Hillary means they have to pay a price, well, that sounds exactly like something Hillary would say.
I'm just getting the warm fuzzies over here because I just love being told that 75 million Americans are responsible for the attack on the Capitol. Just, yay, warm fuzzies. So, the University of Louisville Pan-African Studies Department Professor Rickett Jones decided that he's going to put his little spin on this too and tell us directly in an op-ed for the Courier Journal, calling for Republicans to themselves. The Republicans should shut up unless they first say their thoughty for supporting Trump. Here's what he wrote. Republicans, you should not be allowed to speak about being shocked by President Donald Trump or the recent right-wing raid in Washington, D.C., for your words ring hollow. You all should be forced to shut the hell up unless whatever you say, or you have to say, begins with, I'm sorry. You should not be allowed to condemn Trump or attempt to distance yourselves from him unless you begin with, I have helped him, and I'm sorry. You all, in all caps, you all should apologize because you are all guilty.
So I see a pattern here. 2 million American cops are responsible for the death of George Floyd.
Yes.
And we can't argue that, right? The fact that Floyd's record, his level of intoxication, his previous run-in with cops, his violent behavior in the past, that means nothing.
Yeah.
All the killings of black citizens that we have made major news. Can't talk about their records. Can't talk about the fact that in Racine, in Kenosha, that you actually had 2 kidnapped kids in a car. No. You can't blame the killed person for that. 2 million cops are responsible for that. 75 million Trump voters are responsible for Trump. But no one's responsible for Antifa burning down buildings and destroying private property. That's just community sentiment, right?
Yes, because if it's an individual who does something, you blame the collective. But if the collective does something, then you're fine.
Right. So, but
that's
it's only
exactly
one.
what it is.
But it goes without saying that from when you are examining conservative culture, everybody's responsible for what one person does. When you're looking at collective leftist culture, nobody's responsible.
Exactly.
Not the individual and not the criminals who acted on the individual criminal, but law enforcement and culture and our own very system of government, that's to blame. Right.
Yep.
So let's call this what it is. The problem with America is that it's America, right? We blame America for the bad things conservative Americans do. And we know for a long time now that progressives and liberals have a lot of contempt and want to see the country be remade in the image of socialism and progressivism. So the real problem here is anything that progressives don't like, and we see this manifested in our children's education now, everything liberals and progressives don't like America, including free speech, is now an American problem. And we have already successfully demonstrated to children that America is a dishonest construct. It's not an actual country. It has no real culture. It has no legal argument that it should exist. It has to be broken up, given back to the original people who it was taken from, and apologies and reparations had to be made. What they really want is America to be removed with something much more in their really left wing and let's just call it intolerant vision.
Yeah, and what Ricky continues to say in his article here, his op-ed, was that Trump is a liar, racist, demagogue, and madman.
There you go.
But you Republicans, see how many times it says you. You Republicans, you so-called conservatives were just fine with it. You loved it all. Yes, you loved him deeply, supporting him unfailingly, demonized anybody who opposed him, and rode shotgun with that maniac for the last 4 years. Don't stop now. Keep riding.
Right. And what about the larger, not hugely larger, but larger number of African Americans who went along with that train? How about an unprecedentedly high number of Hispanics, given the last 20 elections, who actually rode that train? How about immigrants in this country who had a shocking number of whom, legal immigrants, supported him? How about African American people like yourself, Ricky, who supported him? You want to say the same thing about them? Because the thing about Trump was elected by a coalition of people, not just by conservative Republicans. You want to make this about conservative Republicans. I want to make it about a lot of people, Ricky, who look just like you, who made the same vote. You have the guts to call them out too? Didn't think so.
Okay, one more comment from our friend Ricky Jones. He blamed Republicans for gaslighting those racist neo-Confederate foot soldiers for years. Again, you are the benefactors. You are their champions. You are their friends. Their acts are your responsibility and your shame. Thanks, Ricky. So if we have 75 million Americans who are responsible for the riots at the Capitol, of course some of them are going to be part of a conservative student organization such as the Young Americans for Freedom. At least that's what is happening at Penn State University, where a Penn State professor thinks it was that conservative student organization at least being, partly responsible, maybe not wholly responsible, but partly responsible. And this is coming from Professor Peter Hedemai, who is a poli-sci professor, political science, and he was asked by the Young Americans for Freedom chapter on their campus to be the advisor, because student organizations have faculty advisors. Well, he could have been like, no, thank you. But that would just be the polite thing to do. So instead, he ripped them a new one. He sent an email to them, and it said, under no condition would I support any group that has an implied or explicit support for Trump, racism, sexism, or indifference to democratic values, including peace, liberty, freedom, and justice for all peoples. And it added as well that I question if your national organization has some responsibility for recent actions.
So yeah, it takes a lot of chutzpah. It's one thing for talking head professors to blame 75 million conservatives, but when you actually go onto Penn State campus, your campus, where there are like, for every one conservative group, you've got dozens of liberal student groups. I guarantee you, if you look at the membership of the conservative groups at Penn State University, they pale in comparison in numbers to the numbers who sign up for the Democrat and liberal organizations on campus. But you have the temerity now to go to that kind of a campus minority and ask the question if it had something to do with the riots. So a bunch of 12 college Republicans in the Young Americans for Freedom, they may have had something. Talk about McCarthyism, right? Mm-hmm. This is what Donald Trump, one of the things that got Donald Trump and others banned, right? For using the word McCarthyism. Talk about McCarthyism. You're going to find in 12 geeky, nerdy college freshman Republicans who make up the Penn State's Young Americans for Freedom, you're going to find a link between them and the storming of the Capitol. That makes McCarthy look absolutely sane.
Well, the professor did blame the national chapter on it, but this nerdy, young, whatever you called him, John Stafford is the chairman of Penn State's YAF group, and he actually sounded more like what a professor should sound like, or actually just a decent human being should sound like, when he responded to the professor saying, I find your response insulting, not only towards YAF, but the entirety of the conservative movement. YAF is a 501c3 organization, therefore it cannot and has not ever endorsed candidates or political parties. Your suggestion that YAF somehow was responsible for the violence at the Capitol last week is unsubstantiated. Your suggestion, YAF has never advocated for violence, and to assert such a claim with no evidence or research is dishonorable. National YAF publicly condemned the violence that occurred. Finally, the assumptions that you made are nothing but biased. You spent the majority of your email attacking my organization and wrongly assuming that we belong to an absurd narrative of violence and chaos, but you never once asked me about the organization or my motivations. I encourage you to research the history of YAF before falsely maligning it. I will continue my search for a chapter advisor to ensure that my YAF chapter has a strong presence on Penn State's campus, promoting freedom and standing against false narratives like your own.
Someone as well-spoken as that. Isn't it amazing how you never hear that kind of clarity for the university? How the university could have said to this professor, while we respect your freedom of speech as a university, we must inform you that your allegations are unfounded, your attempt to belittle and demean and make accountable a group of undergraduates in a club is reprehensible. How come you never get that kind of moral clarity from anybody at the university administration?
Instead, you're too busy focusing on being hypocritical of everything else we have going on, such as Hedemai's bio, which states that he's a distinguished professor of political science, co-fund in microbiology and biochemistry. But here, his research currently is focusing on explicating individual differences in preferences, decision-making, and social behaviors on a wide range of topics, including political behaviors and attitudes, addiction, political violence and terrorism, public health, gender identification, religion, mate selection, and the nature of interpersonal relationships. That one there, the nature of interpersonal relationships. He clearly doesn't want to have any interpersonal relationships with anyone.
And what gets me to is he's researching individual choices.
See how
when
that works?
His entire worldview is collectivist, right?
Is. It's time for some real education. Although it needs no formal introduction, at least according to Dr. Duke, The Lord of the Rings is the preeminent epic high fantasy novel of all time, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. Set in Middle-earth, the story began as a sequel to The Hobbit, but eventually developed into a much larger work. It's one of the best-selling books ever written, with more than 150 million copies sold. But did you know that Tolkien considered writing a sequel?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, this is Biden inauguration week. We made the theme of Instant Classic for this whole week tyranny and dystopia, right? Because that's what's awaiting America. And we've given you some really cool quotes the first 3 days of the week dealing with these issues. I want to take a little right turn here. Tolkien, actually, I'm not interested in talking today about his Lord of the Rings, which is the great masterpiece. I'm talking about the fact that Tolkien actually at one point in the 60s or the early 60s was contemplating writing a sequel to the Lord of the Rings. And he didn't die until 1973, so that would have given him 20 years to give us perhaps another epic that would have been interesting to read. But he ultimately decided against it. The title of the book was tentatively going to be The New Shadow. The old shadow of Sauron has been brushed away, but what's the new evil shadow that was befalling? And in order to glorify and to underscore what we think about what's coming under a Biden administration in this dystopia week, I want to give you an example of what Tolkien wrote about why he didn't write the sequel. He says, quote, "I did begin a story called The New Shadow, placed about 100 years after the downfall of Sauron, but it proved both sinister and depressing. Since we are dealing with men, humankind, it is inevitable that we should be concerned with the most regrettable feature of human nature, their quick satiety with good." That is so brilliant. He stopped writing what inevitably would have been another spiral down into evil for Middle-earth by pointing out that the single most prescient characteristic of mankind is our regrettable satiety with good. We can't deal with prosperity very well. We are lousy at having good times. For 200 years in America, we had unprecedented prosperity. We had unprecedented liberty and freedom. We had a system that was the envy of the world, and now we've given it away to socialists and quasi-autocratic posers. Tolkien was right. He couldn't write a sequel to The Lord of the Rings because it would be too predictable in terms of the golden age that was won being pissed away by human beings who could not stand prosperity. America has been handed over to punks and autocrats and socialists because we just couldn't stand as much prosperity as we had.
Now, if you're a fan of this show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we're going to send you an awesome, incredible tumbler. It's just a little thank you. Now, it is rumored that this tumbler has magical powers, but I can neither confirm nor deny that, so you let me know. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. And now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. Since we talked about the Capitol all episode, did you know the Capitol's dome, which is the second iteration actually of the dome, has more than 8.9 million pounds of cast iron? The first dome was actually completed in 1824, and it was wood covered by copper, so, fire hazard, so they changed it.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.